Hey everyone! Today in the workshop we are going to be painting up an old style Klingon D7 Battlecruiser. Now this model is for a game called Starfleet Battles, which I had originally played decades ago and just starting to get back into. And it's going to differ quite a bit from the k't'inga D7 that I painted up for Star Trek Attack Wing. So I really love the k't'inga aesthetic, and I really enjoyed painting this one up. But for Starfleet Battles, I kind of wanted to go back to my nostalgic past of playing this in the late 70s and 80s with a bunch of my friends. And back then, it was pretty much, the TOS, the original series look for the Klingons. So I bought this model from the Amarillo Design Bureau website, and so I went on there and discovered they had some um, painting guides, and I thought it would be really cool to just do this in the retro, like I said, nostalgic uh, paint scheme. So um, we started off with a priming an original coat of Army Painter Wolf Gray, and we're going to just use that paint guide and put the details in. This should be a relatively quick paint job because it's all essentially one color with just some accent colors thrown in there. So we're going to get stuck in and get started. All right, we've got our base coat on, and I am going to go ahead and do a light highlighting over the entire hull just to kind of start to suggest some differentiation between the colors. I'm going to start with Citadel color Fenrisian gray, and I'm going to use my round dry brush and just cover the whole hull, just to, like I said, just to start to define some highlights and some low light areas. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that, and we'll be right back. Okay, so the first pass of highlighting is done, and I'm really liking how it's nice and subtle. I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera, but it's very nice, and it's starting to define some of these creases too. They're a little bit darker. So I'm going to take another highlighting pass with Citadel Blue Horror, which will be a little bit lighter, and that'll help bring out the highlight areas, and we'll be right back. All right, so our second highlight is done, and it looks a little bit more greeny on camera than it does in real life. I'm very happy with the way this came out. I think it's making the hull look very nice. Uh, so the entire hull now is conditioned with the two passes of highlight. So I'm going to start hitting some of the detail areas. And one of the first areas I'm going to do are the radiators on either side of the wings, the impulse cooling areas up here, and at the end of the boom. Now, the painting guide says that they are blue, and I've seen some of these older style paint jobs where the blue is like, you know, a royal blue or a medium kind of blue. I don't want it to be quite that saturated. I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to try uh, this Akhelian green contrast. Uh, it says it's green, but there's a lot of blue in it, and it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to give that a whirl and see how that looks on the model, and I will be right back. And we're back, and that was a good call. I'm really liking that Akhelian blue or Akhelian green. As you can see, there's a lot of blue in it. It's as dark as I'd like it to be, but you can still tell the color. You can still see the color, um, and it's a nice contrast to the rest of the hull. So our next step, and I put the miniature on one of my painting stands so I wouldn't get any smudges on it from my fingers. Our next step is to lay in some gray. The painting guide says the ends of the warp nacelles and these geometric areas right behind the bridge are gray. So I'm going to go ahead and put a nice warm medium gray in there. We're going to use Citadel Stormvermin fur, and I'm going to lay in that color pass, and we'll see how it looks. All right, the gray is in, and it looks really nice. So far, so good. These areas back here, and the rear part of the warp nacelles. So now we're going to move on to doing smaller detailed parts. I'm going to try Gutrippa flesh, which is a light green, and I'm going to be doing the shield grid, which are these two lines on either side, and the tractors, which don't actually have a molded part. I'm just going to sort of draw those in there on either side of the bridge. And I kind of wanted to make those a light green to give a contrast to all the other darker parts that I'm doing. So we'll see how that looks, and I will be right back. I'm very pleased with that green. It came out really nice. One thing I should also mention is I'm going to go back and do some pin highlighting on the blue areas and also on the tops of the green areas to give them a little bit more of a highlight. So I think that'll make the greens pop even more, but I'm really pleased with how those look. So my next step is going to be, I'm going to add a little bit of dark gray or black, it's essentially black, into the details on the side of the warp nacelles. And what I'm going to try with that is Black Templar contrast. So it should flow nicely into those areas and give just a little bit of an accent. So it pulls some of the details out of there. So we'll see how that looks. All right, the black areas on the warp nacelles are done. I went ahead, since I had the dark, well, the black, let's just call it black. Since I had the black out, I went ahead and did the phaser banks on either side and underneath the nose and underneath the wings. And then I went in with the gray that I was using and did a little bit of the raised detail on either side of the nacelles. So it's coming along very nicely. So I think our next step is to go ahead and lay in all of the red areas, the impulse intake. I might dot a couple on the back for the impulse engines, the navigational beacons, the photon tube in the front. And I think I'm going to use one of my favorite reds, Evil Sunz Scarlet, because that's a nice bright red and I want these things to really stand out. So I will go ahead and put all those in and we'll see how it looks. That Evil Sunz Scarlet never fails to impress. All of the red areas are looking really good. And now we are pretty much done with all the major paint areas. I'm going to start doing the highlighting on these blue cooling areas, and I'm going to start with Lothern blue, and we're going to just start about halfway or 3/4 of the way towards the radiators and the cooling areas, and then just work our way back. And then we'll do a lighter one for maybe the last quarter or so. So we'll see how that looks. I'm really pleased with how these highlights came out. The Lothern blue went in really nicely, and then I went over. After that was done, I did another pass with with blue horror to lighten the ends of them, and they all came out really nicely. So The last thing I'm going to do before we start adding the decals is give a little highlight to these green areas. And I think I'm going to try Ogre and Camo because it's kind of a yellowy green, and I think it'll be a nice highlight to the Gutrippa flesh. So we'll see what happens. I'll be right back. Yeah, that came out really nice. It was just the right complement. Nice little line of highlight there and little accents on the front bits there. And that pretty much, I'll double check everything, but I think that pretty much takes care of the major painting. The next thing we're going to do is add some decals, and then I think I'll find either a line paint or a diluted contrast paint and just do a little bit of line work, and then we'll be done. All right, see you in a minute. So I have prepped the model before we put any of the decals on. What I do is I will take some clear gloss and put it over the areas where I'm going to be putting decals down. It just helps the decals slide easier. And then I will put the decals on and then put another clear coat layer on top of that. And all that shine disappears when we do our final dull coat. So I found some really cool decals from Mark's Models and Toys. They're the Starfighter decals set, and they just have a bunch of really nice Klingon symbols. They have window decals. They have all kinds of vent areas, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to be using mainly the symbols with the names and the Klingon writing on it. I'm going to use the wraparound for the front of the bridge, and that's pretty much it. The areas on either side of the Cobra head where they want us to use these green are a little bit too bumpy, I think, to accept the decals, so I just painted them green. So I'm going to let that clear coat dry, and then we'll put the decals on and I'll top coat them, and then we'll be back. Okay, so the decals are on and they're set and they're looking really nice. So the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of shade and line work in some of these creases just to make the contrast between the dark areas and the light areas a little bit more pronounced. But I want it to be really subtle. I've taken some Space Wolves Gray contrast paint and thinned it down. And I'm just going to start working in these crease areas and just put a little line. Just like that. I want it to be really subtle, but I want it to be there. So there we go. And I'm going to go through the rest of the model and add in some more of those, and we'll see how it looks. All right, we've got the decals in. We've got the shading in. It looks really nice. I even added a little bit of battle damage because, you know, it's a Klingon ship. It should look like it's been through a fight or so. Base is all painted. Isn't it wonderful how when you paint the base, it just brings it all together? I think it looks really cool. Anyway, I am going to go give this a top coat of Testra's Dull Coat, and then we will be back with the finished model. All right, we are done. I am really pleased with how this turned out. It really takes me back to the beginnings of my Starfleet battles career, and loving all of the elements of this. Looking forward to getting it out on the table and playing with it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I will look forward to seeing you guys in my next one. Take care. Bye-bye.